Plastic is everywhere around us, but so is plastic pollution. And nowadays, the problem is getting much worse. Unfortunately, recycling is not the best way to protect against plastic pollution. Plastic pollution describes the excessive use of plastic contaminants in the environment and how the marine ecosystem and the environment is destroyed by it. Plastic pollution and climate change are not separate issues, but instead exacerbate each other's problems. This is because the emissions of greenhouse gases increase in the process of manufacturing plastic products. As such, unrecycled plastic not only destroys the marine ecosystem, but also causes various environmental pollution, such as soil and atmospheric pollution. Did you know that depending on the type of plastic, it may or may not be able to be fully recycled? Plastic can be divided into 6 types, and non-recyclable or other mixed materials. First, PET is one of the most used types of plastic, and it's easy to recycle, so many countries are trying to increase the rate of PET recycling. Also, PET can be recycled as fashion items and again as a PET bottle. HDPE is one of the easiest plastics to recycle, and recycling companies send them to larger areas for recycling. Like PET products, it can be transparent or colored, and pigmented HDPE can be recycled into pipes, glass products, non-food coated bottles, and so on. HDPE is also downcycled with plastic lumber, tables, roadside curbs, benches, and other durable plastic products. LDPE, known as low-density polyethylene, which is mainly used in plastic bags, is theoretically recyclable, but plastic bags are not so easy to recycle because they are likely to break the recycling machine, and the raw material itself is already cheap and low quality. However, despite these difficulties, LDPE can be recycled as a binder and a packaging film. Polypropylene is recyclable, but most of it goes to landfill. This is because polypropylene is difficult to recycle and expensive, and in many cases, it is difficult to remove the smell of the products contained when the plastic was first used. Unfortunately, PVCs, or polystyrene, and other plastics are never fully recyclable. So, is plastic recycling being implemented correctly in every country?
우리나라 재활용은 분리수거장이 대부분 그 공동주택에서는 잘 갖추어져 있어요. 그래서 분리수거가 잘 되고 있는 편이라고 생각을 해요. 분리수거는 종이류, 플라스틱류, 병류 이렇게 이제 구분이 되어 있고, 병류 같은 경우도 이제 뭐 소주나 맥주병 따로, 잡병 따로 구분해서 수거를 하고 있고, 플라스틱은 일반 플라스틱하고 스티로폼 그리고 투명 플라스틱 3가지로 나누어서 분리수거를 하고 있어요. 근데 이제 농촌 지역이나 단독주택은 사실 조금 좀 이 분리수거장이 별도로 갖추어져 있지 않다 보니까 분리수거가 잘 되고 있지 않는 경우도 많아요. 아직도 이제 조금 좀 빌딩이라든지 뭐 이런 데 같은 경우는 분리수거가 안 되는 경우가 있어서 조금 좀 걱정스럽기는 한데, 그렇지만 일반적으로는 잘 되고 있고 국민들의 의식도 좀 많이 올라가 있다고 생각을 해요.
Well, from what I understand about the UK recycling system is it's quite regional, not just in terms of like the UK and Scotland and Ireland. I know, for example, my family house is in Plymouth and we have a lot more recycling down there than where I am now in Northampton, which like in this apartment, we basically have no facilities for recycling. So I know it's quite regional. Globally speaking, we are quite far ahead, both in terms of sustainable design and just recycling amenities and facilities and campaigns. We're a lot further ahead than most countries. So I've been living in Singapore for a couple of years. I've been working there and I did my university there. And as far as a developed country goes, I know Singapore is really far below in terms of things like recycling. And so having that perspective, I know the UK is a lot further ahead than most places in the world, but there's still a long way to go.
I think it's quite similar than in UK. We recycle like beer waste, glass, paper, carton, batteries, and metal. And like we usually like take the trash to like supermarkets have like a collecting point, so we have to take them there, and we only have like mixed recycling in our front yards or like apartment buildings outside of apartment buildings.
So the Michigan recycling system is all on the individual. It's not mandated. You don't really get a reward for it. You have to sort everything yourself and make sure things are clean. It's not regulated at all. Like some of the other states, they have kind of a regulation where if you don't clean it, you get fined. We don't have anything like that in Michigan, but we do have deposits on cans. So every time you buy like a can, you have to pay 10 cents forward on the can. In order to get your 10 cents back, you have to take it to a facility, your cans, and they'll give you 10 cents back for each one. So plastic, we have different types of plastic, and a lot of places will only accept like anywhere from 2 to 3 different types of plastic. So there's a lot of plastic that we're not able to recycle.
So we have, I mean, it's similar to the UK, and we have different garbage disposal for our recyclables. But we mainly focus on paper and cardboard, which we are actually on the top 5 of recycling. And we have PET cans, and I mean the usual. You have plastic disposal, but this is usually the normal wasteful, burnable wastes. And we usually in our homes we separate all of our recyclables, and then we go to the garbage disposables to recycle everything in the big containers. And that's usually how the normal household would do it.
Actually, I think it depends because like in some first tier city like Beijing and Shanghai, which is like the really modern city and capital city, and they have like, relatively good recycling system, like classification of the rubbish and to do some plastic recycle. But for some like the 3 or 4 tier cities, I don't think there's like good facilities to do this kind of thing, because they want to just survive for themselves rather than just for protection of environment.
As you can see, plastic is used extensively around the world, but recycling methods vary widely from country to country. So how can we prevent plastic pollution other than recycling? The most important thing is to reduce the use of plastic itself, but what should we do with the many plastics we've already used? In contrast to downcycling, upcycling refers to a design using recyclable materials, and upcycling using waste plastic means making clothes or bags using discarded or used plastic.
No.
No, I don't.
Of course.
Yeah, actually I know the Freitag.
Are those the bags that are made out of plastic? Yeah, I think that it's nice.
So yeah, Freitag, they've been around for 30 years, I think, and they take truck tarpaulin and turn it into bags and wallets. So this is PVC, which is a very difficult material to recycle or to do much with, really. It won't return to nature because it's a very synthetic material. So if we use it and extend its life in a new product, we're not really stopping the production of waste. We're actually just delaying the point at which some material becomes waste. So we're not really addressing the problem. It's what's called a downstream solution, rather than upstream. You're really saying, okay, we have all this waste. What can we do with it? Sustainable design would say, how can we design out waste in the first place? How can we stop waste being produced?
However, plastic upcycling is likely to cause other environmental pollutions because it has to undergo secondary processing. Therefore, sustainable design must be activated in the future. Then, what is a sustainable design?
When I first started to work in sustainable design, my focus was looking at substitute material. And it is a common entry point, I think, for many people, particularly looking at, for example, recycled material or renewable material, biodegradable material. So, the idea is that you have a product and you use a different material, and that somehow makes the product more sustainable. That's the idea. So material substitution is one approach within sustainable design. Sustainable design is the much bigger agenda, designing for sustainability, and substituting material can be one way to address that, but there are many other ways as well. So at end of life, the 3 materials could be easily segregated and then used again. And if we design the product to allow that to happen, then that's a sustainable material cycle. So that's, a good example. Another good example is bioplastics, I think. So when we talk about plastics, we
Yeah.
assume that we're made from oil, fossil fuel, which is what traditionally plastics are. That's what this is. But we now have bioplastics, which are made from organic sources, often from
Yeah.
plants. So, and the beauty of a bioplastic is that end of life of the product, the bioplastic can biodegrade. And when it's biodegrading, it returns to natural systems and processes. So biodegradability is much better than just degradability. If I throw this away and it gets broken up, it will disintegrate, but it won't biodegrade because it's a synthetic material and it won't return to natural processes, whereas a bioplastic will. So bioplastics can be very useful if we use them correctly. If we make, a carrier bag from bioplastic, when that bag is at end of life, it's damaged, it's torn, we can't use it anymore. It's biodegradable. Ideally, it would be compostable, so we could just put it in the ground and it would rot and return to nature and return its nutrients back into natural processes. That would be the ideal. But we have to manage bioplastics carefully, because if you put a bioplastic into the recycling collection, which is intended for synthetic plastics, it actually creates a problem because the bioplastic biodegrades, the synthetic plastic does not. They should be kept apart. Again, we have to think really carefully about how we design the material cycle such that at end of life of the product, we do the right thing with that material. So I think bioplastics can potentially be fantastic if we use them in the right way. And, so one example, I suppose, is disposable like food cartons. You might buy a burger and it's in a vegware compostable piece of packaging. Yeah, you've seen this. So that in principle is a good idea because the vegware is compostable. So if that can then be just put out in the ground, buried in the soil, that's great. But if we put the vegware into the recycling collection for other material, it actually pollutes that and contaminates it. So you have to really be clear what happens at end of life, and you basically need to design a strategy for what happens to the materials of a product at end of life. So at the beginning, you have to think about end of life, what happens, design that so that we understand what to do at the end of a product's life.
From my own perspective, I think sustainable design is a better way because I'm a designer. So I think problem solving thinking way to solving the environmental problems is quite important because, some designers have more creative and updated thought about it. So I think it's a better way to do as a beginning.
I would say sustainable design would be most important because we do obviously need to work on all plastic recycling with all the plastic we have out there, but we need to stop putting more and more plastic out.
I think sustainable design because maybe then there will be less plastic and we don't need that much upcycling. Of course it's also a good thing, but I think that's better ways to reduce waste to do sustainable design.
I think sustainable design is probably a lot more important. I think being able to build that kind of resiliency into the supply chain is more important as well, and into the product. So I work in logistics. I think the biggest problem that we're facing is that a lot of the kind of product design is outsourced to other countries that maybe don't have governments that really are that favorable to dealing with climate change, or who really have a financial incentive to deal with that. So I think the big problem we're facing is where a lot of the plastic pollution is coming from, things like toys, water bottles, things like that, kind of small things that are just kind of mass produced. They're all being produced in environmentally unsound conditions using products that aren't necessarily designed in a sustainable way. And we're quite dependent on them in terms of our supply chain as well. So I think if we could find a way that we could develop those products in our supply chain that were more environmentally friendly, I think that would make a huge difference. And I think it would make a difference not just for the UK, but globally as well.
I mean, like we said, plastic recycling doesn't really work in reality. So I would say sustainable design is also for the future. It might be a lot of work to make it work, but once it works, it will definitely help the future people.
일단은 가장 중요한 건 안 쓰는 게 가장 좋은데 안 쓸 수는 없잖아요. 요즘 이 현대 사회를 살아가면서 그렇다라고 하면 덜 써야 된다라고 생각합니다. 이미 사용되었던 걸 재활용하는 것도 굉장히 중요하고 업사이클링 하는 것도 중요하지만 그거보다가는 어떤 이런 지속 가능한 디자인으로 덜 쓰게 하는 게 지구의 환경을 더 생각하는 게 아닐까. 향후 미래를 본다면 그렇게 생각합니다.
Therefore, the most basic and important thing to protect the Earth from plastic pollution is to reduce the use of plastic itself, and the plastics that are already used should be upcycled in sustainable design. In order to create a better future for the next generation, we must take the problem of plastic pollution seriously and make further efforts to improve the situation.